Sebastian's breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled out of the cryogenic pod. The chamber around him shimmered with an unearthly glow, a blend of bioluminescent walls and hovering crystals casting eerie shadows. The last thing he remembered was the infernal roar of Earth crumbling beneath its own weight, a catastrophic farewell to humanity. Now, centuries, perhaps millennia later, he awoke to a world he did not recognize. Kneeling before him were dozens of blue-skinned humanoids, their alien forms eerily familiar, yet impossibly strange. Their lithe bodies and symmetrical features seemed sculpted for beauty, their eyes glowing in shades of amethyst and sapphire. They wore flowing garments that sparkled faintly, as if stitched with starlight. But it wasn't their appearance that unnerved him. It was their expressions: reverence, awe, adoration. The chanting grew louder, a harmonious incantation in a language he couldn't comprehend but felt in his bones. A single figure rose from the crowd, her presence commanding. Her skin glowed like a polished gemstone, and her luminous purple eyes pierced him as if reading the depths of his soul. Her figure was striking, tall, elegant, and achingly sensual. "I am Stella," she said, her voice rich and hypnotic, each word resonating with a primal power. "High Priestess of the Aetherials, we have awaited your return, O Progenitor." Sebastian blinked, his mind scrambling to process her words. "Progenitor? You've got the wrong guy." Stella tilted her head, a smirk playing on her full lips. "Do not deny what you are. Your image has been etched into our history, your essence woven into our very existence. You are the human god, the one who will save us." A chill ran down Sebastian's spine. He had no memory of these people, no understanding of their faith, but the intensity in her gaze and the palpable devotion in the air made one thing clear: they believed, and they would not be swayed. "Save you from what?" he asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Stella's smile deepened, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. "From oblivion, but first you must embrace your destiny." She extended a hand, her touch electric as she gripped his arm. "Come, your journey begins now." The crowd parted as Stella led him toward a massive doorway carved into the crystalline walls. The chanting faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. With every step, Sebastian's unease grew. He wasn't a god, he was just a man. Yet, as he followed Stella into the unknown, he couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was far more complex and far more dangerous. "Where are we going?" he demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. "To the sanctum," Stella replied without looking back, "where you will reclaim your divinity." The door closed behind them with a resonant hum, sealing Sebastian's fate in this strange, worshipful world. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. Sebastian followed Stella reluctantly, his bare feet treading on the smooth, glowing pathway that seemed to ripple like water under his steps. Beyond the archway, a sprawling city spread out before him. Towering spires of iridescent crystal stretched into a swirling sky, their surfaces alive with shifting light. Floating platforms moved silently overhead, carrying groups of blue-skinned figures who paused mid-transit to gaze down at him in stunned awe. The devotion in their eyes made his stomach churn. As he descended into the heart of the alien metropolis, the streets came alive with murmurs. Crowds began to gather, their harmonic whispers blending into a disquieting symphony. Everywhere he turned, beings of all sizes and ages knelt, pressing their foreheads to the ground as he passed. "This isn't right," Sebastian muttered, his voice sharp with unease. "They're treating me like some kind of god." Stella glanced over her shoulder, her smile serene but enigmatic. "Because you are. Every life here exists because of you. Without your kind, we would not have evolved. Our sacred texts speak of the Progenitor's return as the moment our salvation begins." Sebastian stopped in his tracks, shaking his head. "I don't care what your texts say. I'm not a god. I'm just a man?" Stella interrupted, stepping closer. Her presence loomed, magnetic and unnerving. "You underestimate yourself, Sebastian. Your mere existence is a miracle to us. You are not here by accident. The ancients chose you." "I didn't ask for this," he shot back, his frustration mounting. He scanned the sea of kneeling figures, their unwavering devotion making his skin crawl. "Why are they doing that? Why won't they look me in the eye?" "Because to gaze upon the Progenitor is to risk unworthiness," Stella explained. as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Our ancestors died for the chance to preserve your image, your essence. You are the culmination of everything we hold sacred. Her words only deepened his discomfort. You don't know me, he said, his voice a mix of anger and fear. Whatever you think I am, you're wrong. Stella tilted her head, studying him as if he were a puzzle to solve. You fear what you do not understand. That is expected, but in time, you will see the truth. Their conversation was cut short by the sound of an enormous gong. The deep, resonant note rippled through the city, silencing the murmurs. Sebastian looked up, his heart pounding, as a group of robed figures emerged from a hovering platform above. They carried a massive, intricately carved banner, depicting a figure that sent shivers down his spine. It was him. Every detail was precise. His strong jawline, his intense brown eyes, even the faint scar above his eyebrow. The likeness was unmistakable, though it depicted him adorned in golden armor, a crown of stars resting upon his head. The sight filled him with an overwhelming sense of dread. Centuries have passed since we last saw your image, Stella said softly, as if sensing his unease. This city, everything you see, is a testament to our devotion. The Aetherials have waited lifetimes for you to awaken. Sebastian clenched his fists, the sheer weight of their expectations pressing down on him. I don't want this. I never asked to be your savior. Stella stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. It does not matter what you want. This is what you are. Deny it all you like, but our faith is unshakable. You cannot run from destiny. The words sent a cold shiver through him. He glanced again at the kneeling crowds, their faces radiating hope and reverence. It wasn't just their devotion that scared him. It was the sheer intensity of their belief. They were willing to die for him, to kill for him, to follow him without question. And if he didn't meet their expectations, what then? As the gong's reverberations faded, the city fell silent, save for Stella's steady voice. Come, the binding ritual must begin soon. Only then will you fully awaken as our progenitor. Sebastian's gut twisted as he followed her into the towering structure ahead, its gates sliding open with a low hum. He had no choice but to play along, but every instinct screamed that he was walking deeper into a trap. Whatever lay ahead, he was certain of one thing. The devotion of the Aetherials wasn't just unsettling, it was dangerous. The towering gates of the sanctum slid open with an ominous hiss, revealing an opulent interior bathed in pulsating golden light. Crystals jutted from every surface, their glow dancing in synchronized patterns. At the heart of the room stood an ornate throne, carved from a single massive gem. Around it, blue-skinned figures knelt in reverence, their harmonic whispers weaving an intricate melody. Sebastian paused in the doorway, the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders like a mantle. He glanced at Stella, who stood beside him, her posture regal and unyielding. Her violet eyes locked onto his, daring him to take his place on the throne. I don't belong here, he said, though his voice lacked the conviction it once held. This isn't my world. Perhaps not, Stella replied, her tone softer than before. But it needs you nonetheless. Sebastian's gaze flicked to the kneeling figures. Their faces shone with unbridled hope, their belief in him unwavering. He couldn't shake the memory of the banner, his likeness immortalized in golden splendor. These people had devoted their lives, their culture, their very existence to him, and despite his initial fear, a thought began to take root. What if he could use their faith not for their purposes, but for his own? What happens if I say no? He asked, his voice low. Stella hesitated for the first time, her confidence wavering. Then we crumble. Our people will lose the foundation of their existence. Without you, chaos will consume us. Sebastian studied her, searching for a lie, but found none. The sincerity in her voice sent a chill down his spine. He turned back to the crowd, their whispered chants rising in intensity as if they could sense the weight of his decision. What if accepting their devotion gave him leverage power even? He could play their game, learn their secrets, and figure out why he was here. And if things got out of hand, he'd find a way to escape. But for now, the idea of control was intoxicating. With deliberate steps, Sebastian walked toward the throne. Gasps rippled through the room, and the chanting grew louder. As he reached the throne, he hesitated, his hand brushing the cool, crystalline armrest. Then, with a calculated exhale, he sat. The room erupted in a harmonious roar, the Aetherials rising to their feet in unison, their voices blending into a crescendo of elation. Stella stepped forward, a triumphant smile curling her lips. "You have accepted your place, Great One," she said, bowing deeply, "and with it, our loyalty." Sebastian leaned back in the throne, letting the moment sink in. The power radiating from the crowd was almost tangible, filling him with a strange sense of invincibility. Yet beneath the surface, unease still gnawed at him. He wasn't here by accident, and these people needed him for something far more significant than faith. "What's next?" he asked, his tone cool and commanding. Stella straightened, her smirk returning. "Next, we prepare for the binding ritual. It is the moment where you truly ascend and unlock the dormant power within you." Her words were laced with mystery, but Sebastian detected something else in her voice: anticipation, and perhaps fear. She wasn't telling him everything, and he intended to find out why. "I'll go through with it," he said, meeting her gaze, "but I want answers. No more cryptic talk. If I'm going to be your progenitor, I deserve to know the truth." Stella's eyes flickered with hesitation, but she nodded. "You will have your answers, Great One. All will be revealed in time." The chanting subsided, and the crowd began to disperse, their faces alight with joy. As the room emptied, Stella stepped closer to Sebastian, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You've made the right choice," she said. "Our people are devoted to you completely. But be warned, devotion this deep can be a double-edged sword." Sebastian arched an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," she said, leaning in, her violet eyes gleaming with something dangerous, "that loyalty is a powerful force, and power always comes with a price." Her words hung in the air as she turned and strode toward the exit, her hips swaying with predatory grace. Sebastian watched her go, his mind racing. He had accepted their loyalty, but he wasn't blind to the complications it brought. The Aetherials were hiding something, and Stella's cryptic warning only deepened his suspicions. Sitting on the throne, Sebastian tightened his grip on its crystalline arms. He might have taken the first step toward playing their god, but he was determined to uncover the truth and ensure that he, not they, held the ultimate power. The air in the sanctum grew heavier as preparations for the binding ritual began. The once celebratory atmosphere was now charged with a tense energy, like a coiled spring waiting to snap. Alien attendants moved silently, arranging intricate patterns of glowing crystals on the floor, each one pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to sync with Sebastian's own heartbeat. Sebastian remained seated on the throne, his eyes following every movement. His decision to embrace their devotion had granted him temporary control, but it also meant he was diving deeper into the Aetherials' world, a world he still didn't fully understand. The more he learned, the more uneasy he became. Stella approached, her violet eyes fixed on him. Her usual confidence was intact, but there was a flicker of something else in her gaze, apprehension, perhaps even fear. "The binding ritual will cement your role as our progenitor," she said, her voice smooth yet formal. "It is not just a ceremony. It is a transformation." Sebastian frowned. Transformation into what, exactly? Stella hesitated, her gaze dropping to the glowing patterns beneath their feet. "You will understand once it begins." "Not good enough," he said sharply, rising from the throne. He stepped toward her, his brown eyes narrowing. "I've played along so far, but I'm done with half-truths. If I'm going through with this, I need to know what's at stake." Stella took a deep breath, her composure cracking ever so slightly. "The binding will awaken the dormant essence within you. It is the spark that gave rise to our existence. Without it, we cannot sustain our lineage." "So this is about my DNA," Sebastian said, his voice cold. "You're using me as some kind of genetic reset button." Stella's eyes flashed with something between anger and desperation. "It is more than that. You are not just a vessel. We revere you because you are the source of all we are. Your presence completes us." "And what happens to me during this ritual?" Sebastian pressed. "Do I just become your genetic battery? Or is there more you're not telling me?" Stella opened her mouth to respond, but the sanctum's gong rang out, reverberating through the chamber and cutting her off. The attendants stepped back, their work complete. The crystalline patterns on the floor flared to life, casting an ethereal light that painted the walls with shifting colors. "It is time," Stella said, her voice firm once more. She gestured to the center of the glowing circle. "Take your place, Great One." Sebastian stared at the circle, his instincts screaming at him to walk away. But he was in too deep now, Refusing would destroy the fragile control he'd gained over these people. If he wanted answers, he had to see this through. With deliberate steps, he moved to the center of the circle. The moment he entered the glowing field, a surge of energy coursed through him, making his muscles tense and his breath hitch. He gritted his teeth, refusing to show weakness as Stella joined him, her movements fluid and purposeful. She stood inches away, her presence magnetic. Her violet eyes met his, and for a moment, all the tension and suspicion between them seemed to melt away. There was something raw in her gaze, something vulnerable. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "No," he lied, his voice steady. "But you should be." A small smile played on her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You are stronger than I expected. That will serve you well." Stella raised her arms, her voice rising in a melodic chant. The crystals surrounding them pulsed in time with her words, their light intensifying until the entire chamber was bathed in brilliance. Sebastian's body felt like it was being pulled in every direction at once, his mind filled with flashes of images, Earth's destruction, alien landscapes, and something deeper, darker, buried in the recesses of his consciousness. He gasped as the energy built to a crescendo, his knees buckling. Stella reached out, her hands steadying him. Her touch was warm, grounding, even as the chaos around them threatened to consume him. "Focus," she commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "You must let it in." What is it?" he managed, his voice strained. "The essence of the Progenitor," she said. "It is you, and you are it." Sebastian had no time to process her words as the energy reached its peak. A blinding light erupted from the crystals, enveloping him entirely. He felt something deep within him crack open, a well of power he hadn't known existed surging to the surface. And then, silence. Sebastian collapsed to his knees, panting. The light faded, and the room returned to its dim glow. Stella knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. "It is done," she said softly. Sebastian looked up at her, his body trembling but his mind sharper than ever. He could feel it now, the connection to the Aetherials, to their world, to something far greater. But along with that connection came a chilling realization. "You lied to me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Stella's eyes widened, but she didn't deny it. "I did what was necessary." "What happens now?" he demanded, his voice rising. "What did you just do to me?" Stella hesitated, then reached out to touch his face. Her hand was gentle, almost tender. "You are one of us now," she said, "and whether you like it or not, you are bound to us forever." Her words sent a wave of dread through him. He had accepted their loyalty, but in doing so, he had become something else entirely, something he didn't yet understand. And as he looked into Stella's eyes, he knew one thing for certain. Things were far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. Sebastian staggered to his feet, his body still buzzing with the aftershock of the ritual. The Aetherials in the room began to chant again, their voices low and reverent, harmonizing in a way that felt more like a living entity than individual beings. He could feel them now, not just their voices, but their thoughts, their emotions, their very essence. It was as if the ritual had bridged a connection between him and the entire civilization. It wasn't comforting. It was terrifying. He turned to Stella, whose gaze followed his every move, with an unsettling mixture of reverence and possessiveness. "What did you do to me?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "You are awakened," she replied, her tone calm, yet heavy with significance. "The binding ritual has unlocked the dormant part of you, the essence that connects you to us. You are the Progenitor in truth now, not just in form." Sebastian clenched his fists, his anger rising. "Stop with the cryptic nonsense. What does that actually mean? What have I become?" Stella stepped closer, her voice softening, as if trying to soothe him. "You are the key to our survival, Sebastian. Your essence stabilizes our genetic code, and your power binds us together as a people. Without you, we are nothing." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had suspected they were using him, but hearing it confirmed in such stark terms made his stomach turn. "So, I'm a tool," he said bitterly, "a resource for you to exploit." "No," Stella said firmly, her violet eyes locking onto his. "You are far more than that. You are our leader, our guide. We don't just need your essence, we need you, your mind, your strength, your will. That is why the binding was necessary." Sebastian shook his head, pacing as he tried to process her words. The energy from the ritual still thrummed in his veins, making it hard to think clearly. "This connection, I can feel them," he said, his voice quieter now. Their thoughts, their emotions. It's overwhelming. It will take time to adjust, Stella said, her tone almost gentle, but you will learn to wield it. The connection is a gift, Sebastian. It will make you stronger than you could have ever imagined. He turned to her, his brown eyes blazing with frustration. And what happens if I don't want this? If I decide to leave? Stella's expression darkened, the softness in her eyes hardening into something more dangerous. You cannot leave. The binding ties you to us irrevocably. If you abandon us, the connection will unravel, and the consequences would be catastrophic for you and for us. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He hated the feeling of being trapped, of having his choices stripped away. So, I'm your prisoner, he said, his voice cold. You are our savior, Stella countered, stepping closer until she was mere inches from him. Her presence was magnetic, her beauty otherworldly. And whether you accept it or not, you are one of us now. Your fate is tied to ours. The intensity of her gaze made his heart race, but he refused to back down. I'll play your game for now, he said, his voice steady. But don't mistake my cooperation for submission. If you lied to me about this, I have no doubt you're lying about other things, and I'll find out the truth. Stella's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. I expect nothing less from you, Great One. You are stronger than you realize, and that strength will be tested in the days to come. Before Sebastian could respond, the sanctum's doors opened, and a group of robed figures entered, their faces obscured by shimmering veils. They carried an ornate staff, its head shaped like a claw, clutching a glowing sphere. The Council of Elders wishes to speak with you, Stella said, her voice taking on a formal tone. They will guide you in your new role. Sebastian glared at the approaching figures, his unease deepening. I'm sure they will, he muttered. As the elders approached, Sebastian couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking deeper into a labyrinth of secrets and manipulation. He had accepted their loyalty and their power, but he was beginning to understand the price, and he wasn't sure he could pay it. The Council of Elders encircled Sebastian, their glowing veils shimmering like liquid starlight. The sanctum's light dimmed as the robed figures began to chant, their voices a deep and resonant echo that seemed to resonate with the newly awakened power coursing through Sebastian's veins. Stella stood at his side, her posture as regal and commanding as ever. But even she seemed subdued in the presence of the elders, her usual confidence tempered by reverence. Sebastian regarded the council warily. If I'm supposed to be your god, he said, his voice cutting through the chanting, then let's skip the theatrics and get to the point. What's the price for this divinity? The chanting ceased, and one of the elders stepped forward. Though his face was obscured, his voice was impossibly ancient, a layered tone that carried centuries of weight. The price, O Progenitor, is both power and sacrifice. To be our god is to shoulder the burdens of our people, to take their pain and suffering as your own. Sebastian's fists clenched at his sides. What does that mean exactly? Another elder spoke, their voice equally cryptic. The binding ritual has tied you to every Aetherial. Their lives are now sustained by your essence. Should you falter, they will perish. Should you weaken, so will they. Sebastian felt his stomach drop. The connection he'd felt, the flood of emotions and thoughts, wasn't just a side effect of the ritual. It was a tether, an unbreakable bond that linked him to every single Aetherial. He wasn't just their god, he was their lifeline. And what happens to me? He demanded, his voice rising. What does this cost me? You will feel their pain as they feel yours, the first elder said. You will bear the weight of their suffering, their fears, their doubts. But in return, you will wield a power unmatched, a power that can shape worlds. Sebastian took a step back, his mind reeling. This was more than he had bargained for. The power was intoxicating, but the price was suffocating. He would be a prisoner to their needs, their survival, their very existence. I didn't choose this, he said, his voice sharp with anger. You forced it on me. Stella turned to him, her expression softening. You are right. You didn't choose this. But now that you've accepted it, you have the opportunity to lead, to make this world yours. You have power beyond anything you could imagine, Sebastian. You can shape our future. Her words stirred something in him, a mixture of defiance and curiosity. If he truly wielded this power, then perhaps he could use it to his advantage. Perhaps he could bend their faith to his will, not the other way around. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll be your god, but on my terms." The room fell silent, the weight of his declaration settling over the sanctum like a storm cloud. The elders bowed their heads, their veils glinting in the dim light. "So it shall be," the first elder intoned. "You are now bound to us, O Progenitor. You hold our lives in your hands." As the elders withdrew, Stella stepped closer, her gaze intense. "You've made the right choice," she said softly. "But be warned, being a god is not without its dangers." "What kind of dangers?" Sebastian asked, his brow furrowing. Stella hesitated, her confidence faltering for the first time. "There are those among us who will not accept your rule. They see your awakening as a threat, a disruption to the balance of our world. They will challenge you." "Let them," Sebastian said, his voice cold. "If they want to fight, they'll get one." Stella smiled, though there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. "You may find that being a god is more isolating than you realize." Sebastian held her gaze, his determination unwavering. He had accepted the mantle of divinity, but he was determined to wield it on his terms. The Aetherials had bound themselves to him, and now it was his turn to bind them to his will. As he stood in the sanctum, the glowing crystals casting fractured light across his face, Sebastian felt the weight of his new role settle fully on his shoulders. He was their god, their savior, their anchor to life. But beneath the reverence and power, he sensed the cracks, the dangers lurking in the shadows of their devotion. And he knew the price he would pay had only just begun to reveal itself. Sebastian stood atop the highest spire of the alien city, the wind whipping against his bare chest as the lights of the metropolis glittered below like a sea of stars. The Aetherials chanted his name in unison, their devotion echoing through the sky, a sound both humbling and suffocating. He had accepted their faith, their power, their lives tethered to his. But the weight of their existence pressed down on him like a crushing tide. He could feel them all, their hopes, their fears, their pain, every thought a whisper in his mind, every heartbeat a pulse in his veins. Stella stood beside him, her purple eyes filled with both admiration and wariness. She reached out, her touch warm against his skin. "You are everything we have prayed for," she said softly, her voice trembling with something that felt too human. "You are our salvation." Sebastian turned to her, his gaze sharp, his voice cold. "I'm your salvation, but I'm also your prison. Don't forget that." He stepped forward, looking down at the city, at the beings who worshipped him, who would live and die by his will. The power surged within him, intoxicating yet hollow, and he felt the gnawing truth in his soul. Godhood was not freedom. It was a cage. As the chants swelled, he raised his hand, and the city fell silent, their collective breath held in awe. For a moment, he felt untouchable, invincible. But deep within, the shadows whispered a truth he could no longer ignore. He was not their savior. He was their undoing. And as Sebastian gazed out into the vast alien sky, he realized that the greatest battle was not against the enemies who would rise, but against the god he was becoming. Because power, no matter how divine, always demanded its price.